Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you're watching right now simply to educate and engage individuals like yourself on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Capt Nostalgia, and on this video we're going to be talking about the Exorcism of God. If you would like more information about what we do as Victims and Villains, along with our film festival lineup for this year's Horrific Hope podcast, more movie reviews like this one, and most importantly, our mental health resource library, along with all of our social media. Links are in the descriptions below. As I said before the commercial break, we are going to be talking about the Exorcism of God on this episode, and let's get into it. He tells the story of Father Peter Williams, who in the beginning of the movie performs an exorcism, and basically that exorcism has repercussions that come back to haunt him 18 years later, a brand new generation, and he has to face his deepest, darkest secrets. Now, I'm going to be straight up honest with you guys. The Exorcist is one of my favorite films of all time. As a devout Christian man myself, I love the character journeys that particular story does, whether it's in literature or it's in film. I think that is a perfect film and a perfect book from start to finish. Some of what I'm going to say is kind of holding everything to the standard of that, but it's also context to allow you to see where I'm coming from as a film viewer. I'm going to say that when it comes to horror, particularly in films that are dealing with things of a either religious and or just a straight up exorcism movie, you have to stand out among the crowd. Subgenre like slashers, it's really easy to be a very generic story because you can get creative with your kills. For an exorcism movie, you have a possessed individual and you have a religious figure and or a priest that is essentially trying to get the demon or the force out of the host, and that is pretty much cut and dry. You really have to set yourself apart. The Exorcism of Emily Rose is a great example because it really gives a lot of background to the character of Emily Rose, her heartbreaking thing, all set amidst the courtroom setting of the story. And I'm going to be honest with you, the Exorcism of God has good ideas, but not necessarily always the best execution. I talked in my interview with the film's director, Alejandro Hidalgo, about the film's use of relational, generational themes, as well as the mentorship between Father Peter Williams and Father Michael Lewis. Will Beinbrink plays Father Peter, and Joseph Marcell, who most people will probably know as Jeffrey from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, plays his mentor, Father Michael Lewis. Brink gives a great performance as a layered, troubled priest who has this really kind of dark past, and he's kind of trying to come to grips with his own mistakes, and that makes for a really compelling character journey. I think the mentorship element of this story allows the story to really stand out among other films within the genre that are dealing with similar themes and narratives. But I don't feel like there's enough of their relationship to really change the course of this film. What I mean specifically by that is I think the Exorcism of God has good ideas that it presents that challenge and the religious and or exorcism specific supernatural horror, but it just ends up falling really lackluster for the majority of the film. The narrative for the most part just feels generic. It feels forgettable. I like the addition of the generational kind of through line that kind of bookends the Father Peter we meet at the beginning of the movie and forces him to really grow, and you kind of get to see he's he's having to kind of come to grips with who he is as a character. I think this movie just kind of falls into safe territory where a lot of the story feels predictable because we've seen this done so many times. A large chunk of this film, aside from the good ideas that do help it stand out, this movie just feels like a slideshow of cheap parlor tricks taken from other films, sewn together in the attempts to make a movie. Well, let's go ahead and run this one through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give The Exorcism of God a 2 out of 5. As I said throughout the course of this video, this movie, it has good ideas. It has good ideas with the mentorship, with generational, with things that really help make this film stand out. The characters do feel well developed, but so much of this movie feels predictable, stale, and familiar. It's just another forgettable exorcism movie. And now time for this week's mental health moment. New to our content, mental health moment is where we take a theme of mental health out from the film which we are reviewing in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. One, I'm actually going to pull out the character journey of Father Peter Williams in this. I think so many of us can relate to his story throughout the course of this. Let me give you the lowdown real quick, just as a refresher. Basically, a priest in the beginning of the film does something that he regrets. It haunts him for almost 2 decades, and when he's actually come to face with this, the consequences of said actions, he has to kind of come to grips and come to acknowledge that he is not the worst thing he's ever done, that he's more than that. It's relatable for so many of us watching this right now. We somehow fall into this mindset that we are the worst thing that we've ever done, that we can never be better. It's almost kind of like we wear the victim mentality with a badge of honor around our identities. And that's not who you are. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. You are not your depression. You are not your suicidal ideations. You are not your addiction. You are not your self-harm. You are a person. You are someone who has thoughts and ideas and talents and stuff that make you individual, and passions, and so many different things. I think that sometimes it's really easy to lose ourselves to depression and those negative thoughts and getting wrapped up to actually agree and come alongside and partner with that depression and say that I am the worst thing I've ever done. I hope this has encouraged you to seek past that and understand that you're not, that you can grow past terrible things that you've done. Sometimes it causes uncomfortable conversations. Sometimes you lose friends in the process. But if they're really your friends to begin with, then they stick with you and they fight and they try to understand and accept you for who you are. That encourages you to find yourself past those mistakes. And if you ever need anyone to talk to, links to all of our social medias and our mental health resource library is in the show notes below. You guys can check out The Exorcism of God when it opens up in limited theaters and VOD beginning this Friday, March 11th. Have a good night and comment below and let me know your favorite exorcism movie. I've already told you guys that mine is The Exorcist. Let me know.